Hi, everyone. He always laughed, except today. One of my greatest heroes, one of Judaism's greatest heroes, Rabbi Akiva, always saw the bright side. When he was just Akiva and he looked at water cutting through rock, he saw a metaphor of Torah penetration and hope for even the toughest student. He was speaking about himself to be able to taste the sweet waters of Torah. When he was stuck outside a village with a rooster, a donkey, and a candle, and he lost all three of them in one night, he stayed optimistic, and his optimism helped him overcome the immediate terror and remain safe. When he walked upon the ramparts of Yerushalayim with the other rabbis and heard the Romans celebrating, and in a second episode saw a fox running on the spot of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, instead of becoming dejected as his colleagues did, Rabbi Akiva utilizes the disgracing moments to be a proof for a future and was able to bring nechama, consolation, to the other rabbis. And even as he suffered with the flaying of his flesh by iron combs, as one of the Asara Haruge Malchus, one of the 10 martyrs, he powers through the pain as he encourages his students to see that he was waiting his whole life to fulfill the opportunity of loving Hashem with his whole soul, b'chol nafshecha, as we say in Shabbos and in the Shema, and in the midst of his execution, offers once again a lesson of optimism, no tears. Make no mistake about it, when we think Rabbi Akiva, we are predisposed to expect him to laugh at the world and at life, not to cry, which is why when Rabbi Akiva cries, we better stop and take notice. The Talmud notes that our parsha contains one episode in the Bavli where Rabbi Akiva's sole response was to cry. Gemara tells us in Kedushin, Isha ha'feiram b'Hashem yislach la, when the Torah tells us that a woman who took a vow and her husband annulled it, Hashem will forgive her. But Matos medaber, what's the Torah talking about? B'isha shenadra b'nazir, b'shama ba'ala v'hefer la. The Torah is referring to a woman who took an neder to be a nazira, to abstain from wine and impurity and grape products, and to allow her hair to grow. But her husband annulled the nazira, says he's allowed to do. She didn't know about the annulment of the naziras, and instead, she continued to violate it anyway by drinking wine and becoming tamei, both things a nazira cannot do. Rabbi Akiva ki havamati lahai psuka havabachi. When Rabbi Akiva came to this pasuk, to which the pasuk says, Hashem will forgive her, Aisha Feiram Hashem yislach la. When Rabbi Akiva came to this pasuk, he would cry. He would say as follows: Mi uma misha niskabin lechol basar chazir v'ala biyado basar taleh. He said, if somebody who meant to do an avera by eating pork and wound up eating lamb instead still needs to ask Hashem for forgiveness, then the one who intended to eat pork, misha niskabin lechol basar chazir v'ala biyado basar chazir, then the one who intended to eat pork and certainly eats pork certainly needs atonement and forgiveness. Alachas kama v'kama. This is the great Rabbi Akiva who never cried, and yet he would cry every year when he would prepare Parshas Matos because of a woman who didn't actually sin. I get it that he saw a valuable lesson. Why did he cry here? And while we're at it, why does he uniquely cry? Why not the other rabbis? It seems like if he was going to cry and he never cried, they certainly should cry. Now that's a great kal v'chomer. But we find no reference to that. Why specifically Rabbi Akiva? Oh, and one last point. Why did he need a kal v'chomer, an a fortiori argument, to tell us that she who intends on sinning and sins needs to seek atonement and forgiveness? Shouldn't that be obvious? You don't need a kal v'chomer for that. Now, while the Bavli doesn't seem to record any other incident of Rabbi Akiva's crying, there is another time that Rabbi Akiva cried in Talmudic literature. You see, the Yerushalmi in Brachos tells us of the time that when Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Akiva died, Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Akiva, passed away. Well, at that point in time, Rabbi Akiva's students encountered their master crying on the Shabbos. They asked him, Rebbe, have you not taught us the pasuk, the karasa l'Shabbos oneg, that ye shall call Shabbos a delight? which Rabbi Akiva, through his tears, said, "This crying, it's my personal oneg. It is my delight." The author of the Sefer HaAgor, cited by the Beis Yosef, notes that oneg Shabbos must therefore be a subjective experience, and for some can actually include tears. How come? The Rama notes that tears are cathartic to some, and if so, they would be allowed on Shabbos for those who experience that catharsis. But to him I ask, Rabbi Akiva was not known to achieve catharsis through tears. He laughed for catharsis. Why then might he have allowed himself to cry? The Taz offers a different explanation for Rabbi Akiva's tears. He notes, Meirov devekuso b'hakadosh baruch hu zogu einav demos. Because of his intense sense of dveikut, Rabbi Akiva didn't cry tears of despair. He shed tears of dveikut, of the chance to be close to Hashem. Indeed, Rabbi Akiva notes that the ultimate goal of a person's life was to be as close to Hashem as possible and to utilize his or her whole being and everything one does, thinks, and feels for Hashem. When one can sense that closeness, there are many emotions that can be triggered. Laughter, yes, but sometimes tears as well. And each experience and each emotion can be viewed and utilized in connecting to Hashem on some level. When one experiences the joy of the birth of a child, or the bringing of that child to the age of mitzvah performance, the parent can and ought to connect to Hashem's joy when he sees us. His children, when Hashem sees us, his children, following in his footsteps. When we're fearful of what will happen with the world that seems to be getting ever more scary every day, we get to take that fear and connect to Hashem, knowing Ki etzbeneni b'suko b'yom ra'ah, that Hashem is ready to protect us even on the darkest of days. And yes, in our moments of loss, we can cry as well, even on Shabbos, says the Taz, as long as it brings us to a deeper sense of dveikus. Rabbi Akiva uniquely understood the message. He was the sole rabbi who entered Pardes to study the secrets of the Torah, the ultimate chance at dveikus, and he went in and came out in peace. When you can connect to Hashem and you choose not to, even if it's not your fault or you aren't guilty of Aveira like the woman in Rashi, you need atonement, not for the sin itself. Rather, you need to atone for the intentional denial of the opportunity for connection, for dveikus, that you intentionally gave up and lost. Rabbi Akiva would cry each and every year as he came to this pasuk. Rabbi Akiva, who took connection to Hashem so seriously that he would find it in the most disconnected places, when he thought it was being denied to him due to his learning disability, or when he experienced personal tragedy where he was lost, sensing aloneness, or yes, even after a national tragedy of Khurban, made worse by the Romans or foxes rubbing it in, and Hashem's seemingly leaving his people behind, Rabbi Akiva found dveikus, and he wouldn't be turned off to it. He couldn't. But he couldn't understand how someone like the woman whose husband annulled her naziris, unbeknownst to her, who gave up the dveikus chance willingly and still didn't commit an aveira. She dodged a dveikus killing bullet, and perhaps might wake up and engage in tshuva for it. But what's worse was someone who intentionally transgressed an aveira. That person was even more likely not to repair the link that was lost. Hopefully, Hashem would open that person to not only tshuva, but to a deeper connection through forgiveness. Isha afeiram v'Hashem yislach la. For that opportunity lost, like a death, Rabbi Akiva would cry. We're often beset with questions about how to relate to challenges in life, be they personal, familial, communal, or national, and navigating them is tough at times. And having a role model like Rabbi Akiva to guide us gives us something to focus on and to strive for. He reminds us to take the experiences of life and our thoughts, our actions, and our emotions, and to use them to think, act, and feel as Hashem would want from us, and to forge a connection with him. What we learn from Rabbi Akiva's laughter and tears, and when we learn from Rabbi Akiva's laughter and tears, to connect to Hashem in all of our opportunities, and not to spurn any of them, we will and can honestly and fully state and experience Akiva nichamtanu, Akiva nichamtanu. Rabbi Akiva, you have consoled us. Rabbi Akiva, You have consoled us. May we quickly get that experience. B'mheira v'yameinu. And a wishing you and yours a Shabbat Shalom to